My name is Nina, and I used to believe love could survive anything. That when a man stood at the altar and said, "I choose you," he meant it every single time. But I was wrong, because sometimes the man who promises to protect you from the world ends up handing you over to the person who hates you the most. In my case, that person was his mother. Her name was Gloria, and from the moment I stepped into Eric's life, she made it clear. I was competition, not a daughter-in-law, not family, just a threat. It didn't start that way, though. At first, Gloria was polite, almost too polite. When Eric introduced me to her during our second year of dating, she gave me this tight-lipped smile and said, "You're much prettier than the last one. Let's hope you last longer." I laughed nervously, but deep down I should have taken it as a warning. Eric and I got married a year later, a small but beautiful ceremony on a hillside vineyard. Gloria showed up late wearing white. She said it was a coincidence. Eric brushed it off. "That's just how she is, babe. Don't let it get to you." I told myself it was fine. After all, I wasn't marrying her. I was marrying him. But it turned out, Gloria would always be the third person in our marriage. When we bought our first home, Gloria insisted she come to every house showing. She criticized every space I loved. Too small, too modern, too far from me. Eric would laugh it off and say she just wants to help. Eventually, we settled on a house, 1-2 blocks from Gloria's, a place I hadn't even wanted. But Eric seemed so happy to have found a compromise. And I was too tired to fight. I should have fought. The first year was bearable. Gloria would drop in uninvited, rearrange my furniture, criticize my cooking, even bring her own dishes to dinner. And every time I complained, Eric would sigh and say, "She just wants to feel included." One day I walked into my own kitchen and found Gloria scrubbing my countertops like I was a slob. She looked up and smiled. "I just can't stand how you leave crumbs everywhere, sweetheart. I worry you'll attract ants. You know Eric has allergies." I clenched my jaw and said nothing. I knew what she was doing. Slowly, she was undermining me, not just in my home, but in my marriage. Eric, of course, defended her. "She's just trying to help, Nina. Don't turn everything into a battle." But it was a battle, one I was losing. Things got worse when I got pregnant. Suddenly, Gloria turned from passive-aggressive to aggressively involved. She started sending me articles, baby name suggestions, and nursery ideas, most of which she expected me to follow. She even showed up at my OBGYN appointments uninvited. At one appointment, she looked at the ultrasound and said, "Oh, look at that nose. Definitely not yours, Nina." Thank God, Eric chuckled. "Come on, Mom." I didn't laugh. I felt small, invisible, erased. I pulled Eric aside later that night and told him, "She's overstepping. I need you to back me up. I need you to set boundaries." He looked uncomfortable. "It's just, she's excited. It's her first grandchild." "It's our child," I reminded him, "not hers." He nodded. "I'll talk to her." But he never did. I began to withdraw. I stopped including Gloria in things. I asked Eric to lock the front door when we went to bed because she had a spare key, one she used too freely. Then one morning I found her in our nursery, not just standing there. She had painted the walls a new color, soft yellow, and rearranged all the furniture, the crib, the rocker, the changing table, everything. I was stunned, furious. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She looked genuinely confused. "Helping." I thought it looked too cold before. Babies need warmth. I couldn't hold it in. This is my house. You don't live here. You don't get to make these decisions. Gloria's face hardened. This is Eric's house too, and he wants me involved. He told me to do whatever I thought was best. That night I confronted Eric again. He sat silently while I cried, while I told him I felt violated, dismissed, invisible in my own home. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're making this too emotional, Nina. She just wants to be part of the family." I stared at him. "Do I get to be part of the family too?" He didn't answer. By the time I went into labor, I was already emotionally exhausted. I gave birth to our daughter Lila after 14 grueling hours. Gloria was at the hospital within an hour, barging into the room without knocking, holding Lila before I even got to for the second time. She called the baby her angel. She told the nurses she was the grandma, and then pointedly added, "The one who'll be raising her right." I stared at her in disbelief. When Eric came back into the room, I told him flat out, "She needs to leave. I need space." He hesitated. Then he looked at his mother and said, "Mom, maybe give us some time." She scowled but left. I thought maybe that was progress, but it wasn't. When we got home, Gloria practically moved in. She said she was helping, but in reality, she was taking over. She took the baby from me every time she cried. She bought formula and tossed my breast pump in the back of a drawer. She criticized how I held Lila, how I dressed her, how I sang lullabies at night. Every moment, every instinct I had as a new mother, she undermined it. And Eric? He was silent. No matter how many times I begged him to stand up for me. One night I snapped. "If you don't choose me right now, if you don't set a boundary with her, and then you've already chosen her." He stared at me, then looked away. And in that moment I knew he wasn't going to choose me because he already had. And I had just become a guest in my own life. But what none of them knew, not Eric, not Gloria, was that I had one final choice of my own to make. And this time I wasn't going to let either of them make it for me. The days that followed felt like slow suffocation. Every time I woke up, I braced myself, not for the crying baby, not for the exhaustion of motherhood, but for Gloria. For her footsteps in my hallway. For her commentary on my parenting. For the way she took my child from my arms and made it feel natural. I'd become invisible in my own home. But it wasn't just the emotional warfare anymore, it was control. And it got worse when I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. One evening I went to the kitchen to heat up a bottle. As I turned the corner, I heard Gloria's voice from the living room, low and hushed. "You need to start thinking long-term, Eric. She's unstable, emotional, not fit to raise a child on her own." My heart stopped. Eric responded quietly, "She's just tired, Mom. It's been hard on her." Gloria scoffed. "She's always tired, always dramatic. You need to think about what's best for the baby, not what she wants. If it came down to custody, you know who the court would side with." Custody? My knees nearly gave out. I backed away before I could hear more, but the words etched themselves into my brain. She was planning something, and he wasn't stopping her. I stayed up all night watching Lila breathe, stroking her tiny hand, trying to imagine a world where someone could take her away from me just because I wasn't good enough in their eyes. The next morning I called a lawyer. I didn't tell Eric, I didn't tell anyone. I needed to know my rights. I needed to know if they could take her. If they were documenting my emotional instability to build a case. The lawyer was kind, empathetic. She told me something that changed everything. Unless you're harming your child, no court would remove her from you just because your mother-in-law doesn't like your parenting. But if your husband sides with her, things could get complicated. I hung up the phone with shaking hands. It was clear now. This wasn't just about boundaries anymore. This was about survival. So I started planning. I documented everything. The way Gloria criticized me, the way she dismissed my role as a mother, the way Eric allowed it. I took videos, saved texts. I even recorded conversations on quietly using a voice memo app every time Gloria said something that showed her intent to take over. And I waited, because something told me they weren't done, and I was right. 2 weeks later, I walked into the nursery and found Gloria sitting in the rocking chair, holding Lila while talking on the phone. She didn't see me. Yes, I've already found a daycare closer to me. I just have to convince Eric it's time to get Nina some rest. Maybe a few days away. Mental health break, they call it. She laughed. Exactly. Once she's out of the picture for a while, we can adjust custody more permanently. I couldn't breathe. She was trying to institutionalize me. She wanted me gone, not just emotionally, but physically. That night, I confronted Eric. I know what your mother is planning. I heard her. I recorded her. He blinked at me, startled. What are you talking about? I played the audio, the entire call. He sat down slowly, like the weight of it hit him. But instead of reacting with shock or horror, he just ran his hands through his hair. She doesn't mean it that way. I stared at him, stunned. She literally said she wants to remove me. Put Lila in daycare. Take custody. How much more do you need? He looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something cold in his eyes. I think you need help, Nina. You've been paranoid for months. You're recording conversations? That's not healthy. I couldn't believe it. He had already picked a side. The next day, I found out just how far they were willing to go. While I was in the shower, Gloria entered the nursery. Again. When I came out, the crib was empty. Lila was gone. I ran into the living room in a towel, panic coursing through my body. And there she was. Gloria. Sitting calmly on the couch, holding my daughter, feeding her from a bottle she brought from her house. You were in the shower for too long. She was crying. I figured I'd just take her home with me for a few hours. Home? I grabbed Lila from her arms. You don't get to take my child anywhere without my permission. Eric entered the room. Mom was just helping. You're blowing this out of proportion. That was it. Something inside me broke, and something else, something colder, sharper, took its place. That night I didn't cry. I packed, not visibly, not in suitcases. I moved quietly. Documents, birth certificates, medical records, my lawyer's contact. I created a private folder online with all my recordings backed up in the cloud, and then I filed for a protective order. Not just against Gloria, but against Eric, too. The judge was a woman, middle-aged, stern but fair. The courtroom was cold. Not just physically, emotionally. It was the kind of place where truth didn't matter unless you could prove it. Where intentions didn't count unless they were documented. And Eric knew that. That's why he showed up with a polished suit, a calm smile, and a lawyer who specialized in parental mental fitness cases. His mother sat behind him dressed in black, like she was attending a funeral. Mine, the judge, the same woman who had granted me the emergency custody order, looked at both sides before saying, "Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, this case is highly emotional. I expect nothing but clarity, respect, and evidence from both parties. Let's proceed." Eric's lawyer stood up first. He made it sound so official, so sanitized, that I was a new mother suffering from postpartum distress. That Eric's mother had to step in out of concern. That I'd recorded private conversations without consent, as if protecting myself was a crime. Then Gloria was called to the stand. I braced myself. She spoke softly, fake tears in her voice. "I only ever wanted to help. I love Nina like a daughter, I really do. But I started to worry about the baby. Nina was distant, cold, often overwhelmed. I feared for the child's well-being. I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked at the judge, who was watching Gloria carefully. Not moved, not fooled. Then it was my turn. I stood. My heart raced, but my voice didn't shake. "Your Honor, I am not perfect, but I am not unfit. I have loved my daughter from the moment I knew she existed. What I faced in that house was not support. It was erasure, undermining, manipulation. I recorded what I recorded because no one believed me, not even my husband. I didn't want to be right. I just wanted to be safe." Then I played the clip, the one of Gloria talking about daycare, about getting Nina out of the picture. The courtroom fell silent. Eric looked away. The judge said nothing for a long moment, then finally asked, "Mrs. Donovan, why didn't your husband intervene on your behalf?" I took a breath. Because he already chose his mother. The judge didn't issue a ruling that day. She said she'd review the evidence thoroughly. But I saw something shift in her expression. A sense that she understood the truth wasn't in how nicely we spoke or how calmly we sat, but in the patterns, the power, the quiet erasure of a woman's voice inside her own home. I walked out of that courtroom not with certainty, but with hope, and that was enough. For now. A week later, I got a call from my lawyer. "We have a problem," she said. "Eric's attorney just filed a motion. They want an emergency psychological evaluation. They're trying to argue you're unstable and shouldn't have full custody." My stomach twisted. Can they do that? They can try, but we'll fight it. The judge hasn't signed off yet. I hung up, and I realized something chilling. They weren't trying to win custody. They were trying to break me. But they underestimated me. Because the version of Nina they thought they knew, the one who cried silently, who backed down, who apologized just to keep the peace, she didn't exist anymore. That night I did something I never thought I'd do. I messaged Eric's ex-girlfriend, someone he dated years before we met, someone Gloria had always despised. I asked her one question. "Did Gloria ever try to interfere in your relationship with Eric?" She responded almost instantly. "Omgi, yes. She tried to get me fired from my job when Eric and I got serious, said I wasn't good enough for her baby boy. She even hired a PI to dig into my past. Why?" I told her everything, and she said, "If you need me to testify, I'm in." I collected more, old texts, emails, a few recordings from early in our relationship. Back when Gloria made comments like, "Just don't go getting pregnant too soon. It'll trap Eric before he figures out if you're actually marriage material." Evidence of a pattern, a long, ugly pattern of control. I handed it all over to my lawyer, and I waited. 2 days before the final hearing, Eric showed up at my door. Unannounced, he looked tired. Not smug, not polished, just worn down. "Can we talk?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I opened the door. We sat at my kitchen table. The baby monitor hummed softly from the other room. He looked at me and said, "This has gotten out of hand." I didn't speak. He rubbed his face. "I didn't want it to get this far. I thought you'd back down. I thought you'd come home. I never imagined you'd fight like this." That made me pause. "What do you mean when fight like this?" He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw fear. "I never realized how strong you actually were." I leaned in. "You never saw me. Neither of you ever did." He nodded slowly, then said the thing I never expected. "I'm dropping the case." Eric sat across from me in silence. After everything, the manipulation, the betrayal, the legal war, he finally said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I'm dropping the case." I stared at him, unsure whether to feel relief or suspicion. "Why now?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "Because I realized I wasn't fighting for Lila. I was fighting for control, for comfort, for my mother's version of what a family should be." His voice was quiet. "And that version doesn't include you, doesn't value you. That's not what I want for our daughter." He admitted he had been scared of change, of conflict, of losing his mother's approval, something he had lived his entire life trying to keep. He said he had convinced himself that I was too emotional because it was easier than confronting the truth, that Gloria was toxic and he was complicit. I didn't forgive him, not yet, but I believed him. And more importantly, I knew that whether he changed or not, I was no longer the woman who would accept breadcrumbs and call it love. We signed a custody agreement that week. Lila would stay with me full-time. Eric would have supervised visitation until he completed parenting classes and family therapy. Terms he accepted without argument. And Gloria? She tried to contact me once more, sent a letter, handwritten, full of twisted apologies and subtle jabs. She wrote, "I hope one day you realize I was just protecting my son from making the same mistake his father did." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Months passed. Life finally was quiet, peaceful. Lila started crawling, then babbling. Every milestone felt like a private victory. Proof that I had done it, that I had protected her, that I had protected myself. One evening, as I rocked Lila to sleep, Eric called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. His voice was different, steadier, humble. "I'm not calling to disrupt anything. I just wanted to say, thank you for not letting me destroy what mattered, for fighting back, for protecting our daughter from all of us." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wasn't protecting her from you, Eric. I was protecting her from the version of you Gloria created. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "She's moving to Florida. She said she doesn't want to be near the drama anymore." I smiled faintly. "Let her go. Maybe she'll finally find someone else to control." When I hung up, I sat beside my daughter's crib and watched her sleep. So small, so innocent, so unaware of the war that had been fought around her. And I whispered more to myself than her, "You will grow up knowing your mother never backed down, not even when the whole house turned against her." I rebuilt my life slowly, piece by piece. I started working again, remotely at first, doing freelance marketing from home while Lila napped, then later part-time at a boutique firm. I got therapy, real therapy, the kind that doesn't shame you for having emotions. I stopped blaming myself. And eventually I forgave the version of me that had stayed so long, hoping love would be enough, because it was enough, just not theirs. Mine. 1 year later, on Lila's second birthday, Eric showed up with a small box. It wasn't jewelry or a gift for me. It was a handwritten letter from him to our daughter. He gave it to me and said, "You don't have to give it to her now. But one day I want her to know what I'd got wrong and how hard her mother fought to get it right." I nodded. It wasn't about getting back together. It wasn't even about making peace. It was about finally seeing the truth, the kind I had screamed and cried and begged for someone to see for so long. And now, finally someone did. I kept that letter, not for Lila. For now she just needs love and stability and bedtime stories. I kept it for me, a reminder that standing up for yourself, even when you're outnumbered, outvoiced, and almost erased, is always worth it. Because sometimes love doesn't look like staying. Sometimes it looks like leaving and choosing yourself